Big time Lamar Jackson supporters and haters have united to defend Lamar. We talk about that as well as Ravens rumblings continue about Baltimore potentially signing another player to round out their roster. All that and more coming up on Locked On Ravens.
You are Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into another edition of Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Oestreicher of Ravens Wire, here with you on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks so much for being here, making Locked On Ravens a part of your day and your first listen each and every single day. Free and available for you, all podcasting platforms. That includes in video form on YouTube, where you can like and subscribe to the channel, and in audio form where you can follow along and subscribe as well. We're 5 days a week on Locked On Ravens, Monday through Friday. Plus, we have bonus episodes like this one sometimes on the weekends when there are more headlines to talk about that we just can't get to during the week. We also go live after every single Ravens game, every single piece of Ravens big news. And we also now have added on the Ravens Squad show in addition to the main show that is live Mondays and Thursdays at 7:30 p.m. Eastern time on YouTube. You can also catch it after the fact, both in video form and audio form. So appreciate everybody being here with me on this Saturday little bonus episode. Hopefully your weekend is off to a good start. Training camp, we're so close. Veterans report on Tuesday. We're going to finally get some action here, some battles, players duking it out for whether it's starting spots, roster spots, making a name for themselves. We are almost there. Not quite, though, and we have some headlines to talk about. In the final part of the show, I want to talk about, I guess, kind of a state of the AFC North. It's more so about the Steelers trying to catch up to the Ravens, in my opinion. The Bengals are still being the Bengals, which is bad news for them, but good news for the Ravens. And, the Browns, to me, aren't really a threat, but we'll talk about them as well. In the second part of the show, there have been a lot of Ravens rumblings just about, are they going to add another player to round out their roster? And I know, I've been asked the question a lot. I see it on social media. Some reporters have talked about it. So we're going to kind of take all those points and talk about if the Ravens truly should or will add someone either before training camp or just before the start of the season. But in the first part of the show, Lamar Jackson has been dominating the headlines, particularly these ranking lists have been dominating the headlines over the course of the last week or two now. And I'll be honest with everybody here, right? I'm very excited for training camp to come. So, we don't have to spend a lot of time diving into the rankings list. It's always fun to look at, or maybe it's not fun when, guys aren't ranked where they're supposed to be. But it's always intriguing, I'd say, to look at these ranking lists from a bunch of different places and, look at where guys are ranked. But, after a while, and it's like ranking list after ranking list after ranking list, it gets tiring. Now, I love the Locked On NFL ranking list that we did, particularly because Lamar Jackson was number one. But that was also, I was a part of that. That was really fun to do. 4 Ravens made that. Wish there were more. I tried my best. But, you get into these lists and it becomes a lot. So I'm very happy to have training camp be almost on the horizon. But we still talk about the big headlines on Locked On Ravens, regardless of what it is. And so that is the rankings. It is Lamar Jackson. And if you haven't seen it, Lamar Jackson was ranked number 4 behind Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, and Joe Burrow on a poll from Jeremy Fowler of ESPN that consisted of NFL coaches, executives, and assistants. He also, was ranked number 5 by Mad Dog Russo on ESPN. A lot of Lamar disrespect is what I'm trying to say. But we have seen recently Lamar Jackson supporters and haters uniting to defend Lamar, which I think is honestly, I guess it's a cool storyline in a way, right? So I want to dive into that here. We'll start with the supporter, and then we'll move on to the hater, both who are defending Lamar in different ways. So I want to start with Chris Brousard. Chris Brousard has been in Lamar Jackson's corner. If there are a lot of big Lamar Jackson supporters out there, Colin Cowherd, after, he was a hater of Lamar early on in, Lamar's career, but he has flipped and, he's been one of Lamar's biggest supporters. There have been a lot of others as well. Chris Brousard, he's a Ravens guy. He's a Lamar Jackson guy, and he saw this list, or at least these lists that are coming out, and he said, quote, "You can't have Joe Burrow ahead of Lamar Jackson. Lamar dusted him in passer rating. Everything else is pretty much a wash. And Burrow was great last year. One of the reasons Burrow's numbers are so prolific is because of that defense. Behind a lot, you've got to throw the ball a lot, not to mention arguably he's got the best duo of receivers in the league, and yet the numbers passing were basically the same. That's not to mention Lamar running for 915 yards, almost 5 times more than Burrow. You might be saying, well, in the playoffs, Burrow's been better. But at least Lamar gets to the playoffs. Burrow hasn't been to the playoffs since 2022. So Lamar's getting there consistently and getting better. Oh, and he's 6-1 versus Joe Burrow head-to-head. Man, Chris Brousard is cooking. He is cooking. This is what I've been saying on the show. I know Chris Brousard has been a Lamar Jackson supporter for a while now, like I said. Every single point here, and actually, this point has been made by a lot of people, including people on the Locked On Network, Locked On Podcast Network. Tony Wiggins of Locked On NFL made this point on the Locked On NFL podcast. Tony and I have talked about that. I'm on that show every Tuesday. Tony and I have talked about it a lot. But it's not just, the national media that believes this. It also, it's locally too. There are all different types of reasons why, Lamar Jackson isn't higher on these lists. These are 4 really great quarterbacks with Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, and Joe Burrow, however you want to rank those 4. But I know that, look, Mahomes has the rings. I don't think that should matter in lists of 2024, though, because I think Mahomes is the worst out of the 4 of them. Josh Allen has the MVP, and I'm sure that for people put him above Lamar. At least that is what I believe. But, I think Lamar had the better season, and, people already know my opinion on the MVP. We'll get to that in a couple of minutes, actually, with the hater of Lamar Jackson that's defending him here. But the big thing is there are so many other underlying factors, especially when you are just box score watching. The passing yards. Joe Burrow in 2024 had 4,918. Lamar Jackson, 4,172. And actually, the stats that were put up on the screen when Chris Broussard was talking about this, Lamar's passer rating was 119.6, Joe Burrow 108.5. Burrow completion percentage was 70.6 compared to Lamar's 66.7. Lamar had the better yards per pass, 8.8 compared to 7.5. Burrow had the better passing yards per game, 289.3 compared to 245.4. Burrow 43-9 touchdown and interceptions. Lamar Jackson 41-4. Chris Broussard is 100% correct. That defense, Joe Burrow was relied on to air the ball out, to rack up, I don't want to call them empty stats, but essentially just to drive the ball down the field 90 yards with, not a very potent running game. Wasn't great for them last year. So it was required for Joe to do that. It's in the context of your team as well. Not to mention on top of that, the big thing is Lamar Jackson doesn't play in fourth quarters when the Ravens are taking care of business and blowing teams out. He gets those off. And so you're also he is leaving stats on the table in those scenarios where Joe Burrow is either trying to come from behind, he's airing the ball out, or the Ravens might be up 30-10 with, 14 minutes to go in the fourth quarter. You're not going to you get the ball back, you're not going to air the ball out. You're going to do clock control. You're going to run the clock out, right? You're going to just run the ball a lot, or Lamar's not going to be in the game. So again, the box score stats to me don't tell the whole story. And Lamar does have Joe and, the other guys beat as well. It's not me trying to come at Joe and say, oh, Joe Burrow is this terrible quarterback. No, he's elite. He's awesome. He's actually really fun to watch play. But there are just conversations in the playoff thing as well, where it's Lamar gets all this hate for losing in the playoffs, but Chris Broussard was cooking. At least Lamar gets there. People are trying to live off of Joe Burrow's Super Bowl appearance. And yes, objectively, Joe Burrow has made more Super Bowls than Lamar Jackson. I get it. It is true. But then on the same side of the coin with Josh Allen, well, Josh Allen has made it as far as Lamar Jackson has. And while I guess the box score numbers are better for Josh Allen than Lamar in the playoffs, and I'm not excusing Lamar with some of the playoff performances he's had. I get it. He hasn't been up to standard in the postseason for, the big moments when he's needed. Now, some people just completely ignore the fact that he's won playoff games, and that's ridiculous. But Lamar and Josh both haven't made it. They've both made it to the AFC Championship game. That has been their peak. Yet Lamar get so much more hate because, the stats don't look as pretty, or, in the moment he has this, that, or the other. Okay, well then why hasn't Josh made the Super Bowl? Like, the argument you can make in the playoffs is, yes, Mahomes has the rings. Like, that is 100% a fact, an argument. You cannot argue that. But, I respect Chris Brousard for laying it out here, and it's giving more context than just the head-to-head and saying, yes, here are the reasons why Joe Burrow's numbers are prolific compared to Lamar Jackson's. Not that Lamar's weren't prolific, but I'm just saying, like, passing yards, for example, right? I think people look at the passing yard stats for quarterbacks and like, oh, look who has the most passing yards. Look at that. Look at that. No, there's a lot more that goes into it. There's a lot more that tells the story. And coming up in the second part of the show, we'll talk about the Ravens hater that stuck up for Lamar Jackson, particularly in the MVP race. So be sure to stay tuned. A lot coming up on Locked On Ravens. First, the show is brought to you by Monarch Money. Ever wish managing your money felt easier? With Monarch Money, it can. Whether you're growing your savings or planning a big purchase, Monarch puts you in the driver's seat. It's like having your own personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money is more than just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place. So in addition to managing your money, you're also building wealth. And for me, I've made it a point to save. I've really wanted to do it. I've been trying to do it. And Monarch makes it really easy, especially when everything is all in one place. So my financial goal of saving, I'm able to monitor everything with Monarch, and it really helps out instead of having to go over here, go over there, go over here. Monarch has it all right there for me. So take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNFL for half off your first year. Again, that's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNFL for half off your first year. Back on Locked On Ravens, Kevin Oestreicher still here with you on this bonus edition of the show, a Saturday episode. We sometimes have these bonus episodes when there are headlines that we just can't get to during the week, when it's a heavy headline week and we can't fit it all in to the shows. I want to be able to talk about those, so we do some bonus episodes sometimes. So appreciate everybody for being here again on this Saturday, taking some time out of your weekend to talk some Ravens with me. I really do appreciate that. Now, we talked about Chris Brousard, and that was over on First Things First. I can't remember if I mentioned that or not, so I'm going to mention it, and hopefully I did, but if I didn't, I'm going to say it here. That was over on First Things First. Chris Brousard, big supporter of Lamar Jackson. He was sticking up for Lamar. Now, a big Lamar Jackson hater also stuck up for Lamar Jackson in a different way. Mr. Mike Florio. We talk about him a lot here on Locked On Ravens, at least when the headlines permit us talking about Mike Florio when he brings something up. And Mike Florio went on the Ryan Ripken show, and he talked about Lamar Jackson and also just the narrative surrounding the Ravens in the postseason. And I thought that, that answer was also interesting. But he said about Lamar Jackson, quote, he should have been the MVP last year. Nothing against Josh Allen, but I think Lamar's season was more impressive. I don't know why enough of the voters went with Josh Allen instead. I have one of the votes, and I made Lamar Jackson number one and Josh Allen number two. Now, Mike Florio was vocal about that when the MVP process was going on and people were voting. And the thing that I liked about the MVP process, not so much how the vote went, but the process in general, you hear all these anonymous polls. We saw it with Jeremy Fowler and these anonymous coaches, executives. The MVP voters, they were, I don't know if they expected their votes to be publicized, but their votes were publicized. And so we got a list of every single voter and who their ballot was. Their ballot, literally, I think it was 1 through 5, I think, was the ballot that we got. Like, we got the full thing. I loved that. And yes, Mike Florio was an MVP voter for Lamar Jackson. And again, Mike Florio and Lamar Jackson, it's not a great relationship in terms of Mike Florio. Does not speak very kindly of Lamar Jackson, and Lamar Jackson has certainly fired back at Mike Florio. And, Mike Florio, he says, oh, why can't we be friends? Well, Mike, unfortunately, I think that bridge is probably burned because of some of the things that, he has said to Lamar or about Lamar Jackson. I don't even know if they've had a conversation, the two of them, just like in maybe an interview his rookie season. I'm not sure. But then Mike Florio was also asked just in general, and he talked about the Ravens just in the playoffs and what they need to do to get over that hump. And he said, quote, the team is very, very good. I think it's mental more than anything else. They've been in enough opportunities to get them to the Super Bowl with Lamar Jackson, and every time you fail, it enhances the narrative. So every time you're back at it, and the whole vibe changes once the regular season ends. Everything shifts, everything pivots. That game in Buffalo, they were the better team. They should have won that. But I think there's something that is mental about your history because it all magnifies and it all amplifies in that moment. And the more extensive your history of not getting through, the harder that is to overcome each passing year. They just need to have a level of confidence that carries from the regular season into the postseason where they completely forget about the past. And I can't believe I'm saying this, but I actually agree with what Mike Florio is saying here, where I, think it is a mental component. It's not about the Ravens not having the better roster or not having the better team. I think they've been in the situations where, yes, they were a better team than Buffalo last season. They were a better team than Tennessee back in 2019. Kansas City, I give the Ravens that edge as well. They were awesome in 2023. It's not about the fact that, they're the underdogs roster-wise. They've been the favorites, and that's why it's been so disappointing. But the confidence level, and I don't know if it is, just like, man, every year that you go through something like that, we hear the mentality from the Ravens and the players and the coaches of like, yeah, we're adding that fuel to the fire. We're so motivated. We want to, be better and get to our goal. But then once you're actually in that moment, it's just human to have those thoughts creep up, and you have to do everything in your power to shift that mindset to, no, this is a new year. It's 100% different. New year, let's go. New playoffs, let's go. And the thing also is that, yes, every time you do fail to reach the Super Bowl, it does enhance the narrative around you and, to an unfortunate extent, Lamar Jackson. Now, Mike didn't necessarily, the only time he named Lamar in this answer was when he said there's been enough opportunities to get them to the Super Bowl with Lamar Jackson, and it does enhance that narrative. And that's the unfortunate part where everyone is just waiting for the Ravens to mess up or lose in the postseason and say, oh, there it is, here it is. This is what we all know. This is the Ravens. It just is what it is. They're never going to get there. They're never going to do it. But then it gets taken like 8 steps further. And Mike Florio also has been guilty of this. Mike has been in on these conversations as well, where it's shifted not just to the team, to Lamar Jackson, which is why when there are all these conversations about, is this, a failure of a season for Lamar Jackson if the Ravens don't win the Super Bowl? I mean, I guess yes, to an extent, but I would rather have that conversation be, is it a failure of a season for the Ravens? Because there's no context behind that. Where last season in the postseason, I've said this over and over again, but yes, Lamar played a part in that. And it's totally fair to criticize him for his first half. Those turnovers, the miscommunication with Rashod Bateman was super unfortunate. And then obviously the fumble that was almost returned for a touchdown, that was bad. But he also was a key reason why they were in that game in the second half, and he led that touchdown drive with, I was at wide receiver and you were at wide receiver. There was nobody out there. Zay was hurt. Rashod Bateman wasn't on the field. It was really incredible what he did in that second half. He almost willed the Ravens back. But the reason they were in that hole was because of what Lamar Jackson did. And not only Lamar Jackson, right? The defense didn't start well. And the defense has its own fair share of questions, but that's what I'm talking about, right? It's the context behind. And for the Ravens, in the 6 playoff losses in the Lamar Jackson era, it's a stat I say over and over and over again. The Ravens have had 15 turnovers compared to just 2 takeaways, a minus 13 turnover differential. You're not winning games that way. You have to be able to force turnovers in big spots, in big games to win them. And how do you do that? You have to get out of the trend. It just feels like there's a trend with this Ravens team when they get to the bigger moments against the bigger teams. And I'm not trying to discount the Ravens beating the Steelers last year, the Texans the year prior, Titans back after they lost to them. Those are big deals and those are big postseason wins. But it has to be sustained. You can't just win one playoff game and then bounce. That can't be what you do. So for Mike Florio, he has been a Lamar Jackson hater, right? He's been someone we've talked about. He's had very unfair criticism of Lamar Jackson. He's been very guilty of that. And it's been something that has been pretty disrespectful, right? I mean, I think Mike Florio certainly he tries his best to toe that line of disrespectful and not, but more often than not, he ends up on the other side of it, and it is disrespectful. But, in this case, he stuck up for Lamar Jackson and defended him and said that he should have been the MVP last year, something that he was very vocal about again during that process. So supporters and haters uniting to defend Lamar Jackson, and hopefully, that conversation and the defense can continue over the course of this season, but we will see how that all unfolds. Coming up, though, in the final part of the show, we'll talk about the rumblings continuing around the Ravens about if they're going to sign somebody before training camp or before their season begins. And also, the Ravens' rivals are making moves, or at least trying to make moves, in hopes of catching up to Baltimore. So be sure to stay tuned. A lot coming up on the show. Back on Locked On Ravens, Kevin Oestreicher here with you. Still talking Ravens, as we always do on this show. Really exciting as vets report to training camp on Tuesday. We'll obviously be locked and loaded here on Locked On Ravens. After every day, we'll be diving into the winners and losers of that day, who impressed, who didn't, and just everything relating to training camp. And then we have a couple of exciting things coming up for the season, which I'm really excited about as well. So be sure you stay tuned for those updates, because I cannot stress how pumped I am to kick this thing off and, continue to add on to what we do here on Locked On Ravens. But let's talk about the Ravens and kind of some fun conversation, moving away from the Lamar Jackson and the lists and the rankings and all that stuff. The Ravens still have opportunities to improve their roster, right? Obviously, Jaire Alexander comes in. That was a steal of a deal. One of the best moves of the offseason by any team, in my opinion. But there are still opportunities. We've talked about it here on the show, whether it be safety to replace our Darius Washington, maybe a guard, maybe an edge guy. Despite the fact that Baltimore's roster right now is so deep and they have star power, really solid veteran depth, a lot of young talent that can step up, we know that Eric DeCosta and company are always looking for ways to improve their roster. And so Jeff Rebeck has done some Q&As recently. He's put out some really good articles. Jeff is obviously one of the best in the business. And he was asked a little bit about some of the free agents who were still available, including Jadeveon Clowney and Zadarius Smith at the edge position. And he was asked, do you see Baltimore signing either of them before or during camp? And Jeff said, quote, the Ravens like their young edge rushers and believe they need to play appropriately to develop. I don't think they want to reduce the snaps of Kyle Van Noy, Afe Owe, and Tavius Robinson anymore in the presence of Mike Green and a healthy Deza Isaac already could. You can never have enough pass rushers, but adding Clowney or Zadarius Smith would impact what production you get from the guys you already have. He also said, quote, you can only play so many guys. I'd include an asterisk next to my answer. Wouldn't rule it out, because I could see a scenario in which the Ravens use the first few weeks of training camp to evaluate the young edge rushers. If they don't think they're ready to make an impact, they could turn to Clowney or Smith. And we've seen this happen before, particularly back in 2023. The Ravens, they needed edge help. It was obviously a need, heading into August, heading into training camp. It was decently obvious that they needed to add a body or two. And they brought in Jadeveon Clowney a couple weeks before the season started. And then Kyle Van Noy came in, obviously, during the season, a couple weeks after the season started. So the Ravens truly, I know that, you might say, oh, it's a cliche thing to say. The Ravens are always looking for help. Oh, ha, ha, ha. No, it's true. I mean, they're always looking for help. They like to carry some money into the year. And a big move could also be extending somebody as well to free up some money potentially for the trade deadline, or to add someone a couple of weeks into the season. And the way, and I've had this conversation with a couple of people and kind of made this point of the way that it works now, especially as you get into the later parts of July and August, is players are looking for opportunities. And a lot of opportunities right now, a lot of rosters are set at least 90-man wise, where a lot of guys are competing for spots, and there might not be a ton when it comes to just right off the bat, hey, agents calling up teams, you need my, let's say offensive line. Oh, you need my guy. He's an offensive lineman, he can help. And teams will say, we got 10 guys competing for spots, 15 guys competing for spots right now. Maybe we'll call you back. Or maybe he can be a back end guy, but we don't have a spot for him on the starting. For like a Brandon Scherff, for example, who I think a lot of people, I would love Brandon Scherff from Baltimore, but at this point, I think that players are waiting. We know that guys get injured during training camp and the preseason and early portions of the regular season. And sometimes it is within the player's best interest to wait a couple of weeks into the year to see what opportunities open up. And, if a team loses a key contributor and a really good player is still sitting in free agency waiting for an opportunity, that automatically becomes a match. So for the Ravens right now, I mean, my stance on a guy like Clowney or Zadarius Smith, even Matt Judon, right? Those guys, I'd love it. But where do they, like Jeff kind of noted, where do they fit in right now? Because I only have the Ravens keeping 5 edge rushers, and David Ojabo is already out of my picture. I don't see them cutting it easy, Isaac. If they signed a Clowney or a Smith or a Judon, that would be 6. And you would either have to probably move off of another inside linebacker. Maybe it's on the offensive line, a secondary. And I'm not saying that's not possible. It certainly is. But I think that for the Ravens, maybe they do want to save their money for a potential trade or for a potential injury that happens. Then you can go out and fill that need. Now, the risk you run in doing that is, I don't think these players are going to be available forever. Maybe some of them will, but I don't think that all these guys are just going to be, oh, hey, week 14, Jadeveon Clowney, come on down. No, I think by that point, guys will be signed. Also, maybe the Ravens are looking for fits, and maybe they don't view, and, I think Clowney is a good fit for them, but, maybe they don't view Clowney or others as a good fit, and they are waiting for cut down day. Maybe someone gets cut that's a surprise. And, like who thought Jaire Alexander was going to get cut this late in the offseason? Not a lot of people. That's what the Ravens sometimes wait for, where if you just go and you spend all your money and you don't have anything left over, you don't have opportunities to get guys like Jaire Alexander once, they're cut like that. So that could also be a reason. So look, I'm not ruling it out for Baltimore. Certainly they're always looking to improve, and I truly mean that. But I think Baltimore is taking their time right now. They're evaluating, and look, because I said this, they're going to sign someone like tomorrow or next week or something. But at the end of the day, the Ravens, they are not in a position of desperation where they have to go out there and sign a guy. If they don't touch their roster and they don't add to it again before the season starts, they're still prime Super Bowl contenders. Sure, you can improve on that. There are always areas to improve, but they don't need to operate that way. A team like the Pittsburgh Steelers, they do have to operate that way in terms of trying to catch up for the Ravens. We saw the Steelers extend TJ Watt on a massive deal. Something the Steelers essentially had to do. I don't expect TJ. It was essentially 3 years added on to his deal. This was the last year of his contract. They added on 3 more years. He becomes the highest paid non-quarterback in the NFL. Huge deal for him. TJ is a heck of a player. He's given the Ravens fits whenever they play, but I think by the time that contract is in the last year, he will have slowed down a little bit. But you have to pay your guys that money like you do. I don't blame them for signing him to that contract. I think it was a good move for what they need now, but I think it will be a kind of an albatross contract by the time that we get to that last year. The Bengals are still being the Bengals, and still nothing on Shamar Stewart, nothing on Trey Hendrickson. It's good for the Ravens, not good for the Bengals, but I'm so out on the Bengals this season. It's not even funny. Like well, I guess it kind of is, but I don't believe in Zach Taylor at all. I think he should have been fired 2 years ago. I do not believe in him as a coach at all. And it's not sad from a Ravens perspective, but it's sad for guys like Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, and T. Higgins, who make up an incredible big three. And the Bengals just seem to be wasting their prime years, which again, from a Ravens perspective, if you want to do that, Bengals, I will take it. I will take it. And then the Browns, again, they're not doing anything for me here. So long story short, Ravens to me should be highly favored to win the AFC North yet again. Again, you can't pencil it in until it actually happens, right? Games aren't won on paper. Championships aren't won on paper. You got to actually play the games and do the thing. But for me, I think the Ravens are in a very good spot heading into the 2025 season. That's all I have for you today, though. I'm Locked On Ravens. Thank you for tuning in to this bonus episode here today. If there's another headline to talk about, we'll be back here tomorrow. But if not, we'll take a break, and I'll see you back here just in a day on Monday. So be sure to stay tuned for all the content and coverage we have on Locked On Ravens. Tell a friend, tell a family member that we have them covered just like we have you covered over here on Locked On Ravens. So be sure to stay tuned For all of that, hit the like and subscribe button in video form and follow along in audio form on the way out. And I'll see you right back here soon on Locked On Ravens.